Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. The Chiefs are in the final stages of determining their 53-man rosters, and we help them out on this episode. Beat writer Jesse Newell and columnist Vahe Gregorian break down the big decisions facing the Chiefs as they look to shape a roster that'll help them win a third straight Super Bowl. What factors go into the process of deciding how many players to keep on offense and defense, and how are the final players in each position group determined? Okay, let's get started with our discussion with Jesse Newell and Vahe Gregorian. The whole preseason, right? Training camp and through the preseason games, we talk about who the seventh wide receiver could be, who the fourth running back could be, who the fifth cornerback could be. All these guys that are going to end up playing about, 20 snaps during the year. But, hey, that's what preseason training camp are about. It's fun. And that's what the third preseason game is about. The Chiefs play the Chicago Bears on Thursday at Arrowhead Stadium. Starters will not play for either team, so no Patrick Mahomes versus Caleb Williams. But we are going to see some position battles. I guess if there's any one of the preseason game that's about position battles, it's this one. So I guess the question becomes, and I know this is kind of broad-based, but what exactly should we be looking for in preseason game number 3? Jesse, is it just take all the positions and look at who the bottom candidates are and see if they're fighting it out and who plays? What are we going to look for in game 3?
Yeah, a little bit of all of the above. The guys that don't play, you're on the team. You know what I mean? Like, you're the starters unless you're hurt. Guys like Patrick Mahomes probably not going to play. Probably Carson Wentz isn't going to play as the backup quarterback. So a lot of those guys, if you don't see them play tomorrow or on Thursday in this game, you basically know that they're on the team. But I do think there's some positions that maybe lend their eye more than others in this particular game. Running back is one I wrote about today. Blair, just kind of unsettled at the back end. We still don't really know with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's missed about half the camp practices with the PTSD that he has. And so it seems like the Chiefs like him and will get him back on the field if they want. But could he be shifted to a list that maybe keeps him off the roster to start the season so he can build back up? I don't know yet, but Carson Steele has performed well. Deneric Prince seems to be right on the bubble. So a position like that, receiver, McCole Hardman even mentioned to you yesterday, Blair, that, he's sort of on this sort of roster bubble and wonders what's going to happen with him. But guys like him, Justin Ross, Nico Remigio, that's their last chance to make an impact. And then linebacker, the Chiefs have some guys in the linebacker room that are rookies, Swayze Bozeman, Curtis Jacobs, who are kind of pushing guys like Cam Jones that have been at the end of the roster in previous seasons. So you look at all those sorts of things. It's not probably the most compelling of television that the Chiefs have in the preseason, but there are some roster battles to be won. And every year we're surprised by somebody making it. Usually those guys perform well in preseason week number 3.
I want to get into the position groups in a bigger way, but Vahe, fans are asked to pay full freight for a third preseason game in which the starters, they're not going to see Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce or Chris Jones or, like I said, Caleb Williams. Why should they come out and see this game?
Well, I tell you what, Blair, the way you laid it out really makes the point that, like, if you're making the team, you're probably not in this game, more or less, right? So, or if you're set anyway, you're not in this game. So, frankly, you've got to be, I think, sort of a super fan to find this engrossing. And fortunately for the Chiefs, there's plenty of super fans. I think, you said this earlier, but really there's been, I don't think you'd say there's a lot of drama to camp at the top ends of the roster. I think the whole camp has been about, can they develop depth? Because I think we've talked about this before, but I think you have to feel pretty good about certainly the starting lineup and certainly a few positions with some depth. But I think the absolute question for the Chiefs this year is, can they continue to avoid catastrophic injuries? And if they do have some bad injuries, who's stepping up? They've had kind of the good fortune to have guys ready at meaningful positions where injuries were suffered in the last couple of years. And obviously the most dramatic things were with Tranquil being able to be part of things last year. And, Mike Edwards able to being there for Brian Cook. So in a way, this is the most intriguing preseason game because you're going to, I think, get a chance to have a sense of who most could fill those roles. But I think also it's the game itself, right, almost couldn't be more meaningless. And I think that's what's a challenge. And we'll see. I would like to throw this at you guys, though, too. Right now, how many spots do you feel like are virtual locks? 40-ish, 45-ish? Is that too many? Is that too few?
I mean, I think if you're the Chiefs, that's what makes them good, is that there's not many spots available. You go into a camp and you sort of know what's out there. By the way, the reason to attend this game, guys, is tailgating. That's the reason. It's the worst part of our job is to park and then walk through all the barbecue and adult beverages that are being partaken in when we go up to the stadium, and knowing that a lot of people right there on the outside are having a really good time. But, I think the main spots we're talking about are the ones I mentioned earlier. Vahe, is back into the receiver room. Maybe you're talking about one spot there. Back into the running back room, maybe one spot there. I think the linebackers is pretty open. But the back end of all these rooms, it's kind of like you're deciding between, receiver 6 or 7 or cornerback 6 or 7. And this is where you can separate yourself. And we know this too from last year, like a guy like Amir Smith-Marset. If you do really well in one of these games, potentially you can get traded to somebody else. I mean, the film is the film. And so these guys, it is good when they can get out there and make a play and have sort of an NFL highlight and potentially open the eyes of other teams. And that's sort of the spot the Chiefs are in right now. They know most of their roster. Maybe the Carolina Panthers don't know most of their roster. And if that's the case, then potentially one of these guys can show off and show out and potentially end themselves up on an NFL roster by the next couple of weeks. And if that's the case, then week 3 will be worth it.
Just one last thing about the matrix that I find kind of interesting, and Jesse, with regard to Clyde Edwards-Helaire and things we've spoken about and what you've written about. So on one hand, you've got the dynamic of Matt Nagy saying, well, we know what Clyde can be, and not necessarily feeling Clyde needs to demonstrate anything, but we've still sort of got a little bit of mystery about his availability, in game out, week in, week out. And then you've got Dave Toub, the special teams coordinator, saying he's going to, pound the table for Nico Remigio, which may or may not matter much. But it's funny that you've got all this kind of different input that's going to be part of how these last decisions get made, and hard to say what obscures one aspect and what ultimately bears out.
Adds to the drama, doesn't it, when you have assistant coaches at press conferences mentioning players specifically? I don't have Nico Remigio on my team right now, and that was an impassioned plea from Dave Toub on at the press conference the other day. Just to break this down, it's a 53-man roster, and you take 3 positions away immediately: the kicker, the punter, and the long snapper. So you've got 50 positions left, and typically teams break it down 25 players on offense and 25 on defense. And if we can just take the defensive side here first, the math is kind of easy. You're almost looking at 5 positions for each of the 5 players for each of the 5 positions: defensive tackle, defensive end, linebacker, cornerback, and safety, right? We can quibble and have 4 in one and 6 in another, but it kind of works out that you get 5 each at each of those positions. It's on offense, I think, where you've got to do the math doesn't work as easily. So 2 quarterbacks, right? Patrick Mahomes and Carson Wentz. In the past, the Chiefs have kept 3, but they've learned you only have to keep 2 quarterbacks. It's after that it gets pretty interesting to me. We spent some time last week talking about the running backs. We've touched on it here today. Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it Carson Steele, the undrafted free agent, Deneric Prince, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who another one of those coach hints, as you mentioned, Matt Nagy saying we know what we have with him. He doesn't need to play on Thursday. Trust, that's right. Tight ends, is it a lock that 4 tight ends are going to make this team? Is Irv Smith a lock for the Chiefs? 7 wide receivers, 10 offensive linemen. If you add it up with the max, right? 4 running backs, 4 tight ends, 10 offensive linemen, 7 wide receivers, you come up with more than 25. You come up with 27. We got to find room on the. You got to take a couple guys off of there. So what goes into the decisions? I mean, obviously talent, but does it matter whether a player was drafted or not, or whether he came via trade or through free agency? What are the factors, Jesse, that might be separators when it comes to the last player to position?
Yeah, I feel like we really don't talk about this enough every single year, which is a lot of this roster math comes down to, do the Chiefs think a guy is going to get claimed by another team? And how much talent can you keep in your building? Things that work against guys like Nico Remigio and Deneric Prince are, they've been on the practice squad before, and every team has to get down to 53 is making these tough decisions. It's just really tough unless you see something crazy on tape to cut one of your own players to sign a guy from the Chiefs. I mean, you got to be really confident, because these teams already are getting down to 53, feel like they're going down the same thing. They've been with these players the last 4 weeks. They don't want to cut them. So those sort of roster bubble moves, I think the biggest thing for the Chiefs is they try to keep as much talent available. And if they think a guy can get to the practice squad, they can still help you from the practice squad. You can get elevated up to 3 times, throughout the course of the season. And so keeping talent is kind of one of those top things. But you're right, the roster math of this offensively, especially with Hollywood Brown potentially out for maybe 1 or 2 weeks, you would think they would keep 7 receivers to try to maybe kind of make up for that in the early going, to have enough guys and enough bodies there. But it really does have that trickle-down math of like, okay, probably 3 running backs makes more sense than 4. I think 4 tight ends, because Andy Reid uses 3 tight ends enough in sets that you want to have some depth there. But that does really complicate things for the Chiefs. And how do they feel about their backup offensive linemen? How many of those guys do you keep? Do you go 26-24? Do you go 26 on offense, 24 on defense? All those are to be determined. But I do think at the end of the day, I think a big consideration we always have to keep in mind is whether a guy has a good camp or not, can that guy get to the practice squad? And that usually does have some determining factor on whether he remains with the 53-man roster or not.
Don't you think candidates like that are people like Remigio, a guy that, although look, he's flashed, he's had a good preseason. The Chiefs are the 2-time Super Bowl champs. Their leftovers are going to be more tantalizing than other teams' leftovers. It's a cruel way of saying it, but it's kind of what they are.
I think that's a great point too. And Jesse, I'm glad you brought up that aspect of it, because it's sort of game within the game within the game. And some of those things, where it's just, I don't think any way for us to really have a total grasp on, but obviously they do. And Blair, I like that point too. I mean, aren't you more tempted to look harder at guys that can't quite make the best team in the NFL? So I'm sure it's an imperfect science, but knowing the front office as we do, I think it is a science for this front office, and a lot's going into it. And it'd be pretty cool to be in the room to hear the breakdown of how they assess these very points. We're probably not going to get there, but we can keep nagging them.
I think the Nico Remigio thing, you guys mentioned the thing that was so important with Matt Nagy about a week ago. He said with Carson Steele, what he's done so well at running back is he's been in the right place at the right time, and they feel like they can trust him. Nico Remigio, in that first game against Jacksonville, had the ball stripped away from him on a play. And it just seems like the trust has kind of faded over time with that, or just immediately with that, because we did not see him out there as many opportunities the next week in practice. We heard Matt Nagy talk specifically about that particular play. And so this is really where guys can separate themselves up. And it's also where they can separate themselves down. And so I think, unfortunately for Nico, that's been a play he's been chasing ever since. So he needs to put something out there. He needs to have a really good performance in this 3rd preseason game. It's not out of the question, guys, because I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was Thomas Jones. We thought that he was a likely cut on the Chiefs roster, and he came out and had a great 3rd preseason game. And Brett Veach even admitted after the game that they were on the fence with him, but his 3rd preseason game got him on the roster. So that's why these games are important. I mean, Nico Remigio, Louis Rezamet, those sorts of guys, if you can come out here and make a play and show your worth in a game setting, that's going to have a big weight, and it could be the last thing on the coach's mind when they decide on cuts. It's just you're facing an uphill battle, and that's why you get out there and try to do these things, and that's why this is a really important game for so many guys.
Quick question, sort of drilling into one of the points you guys made, but in your minds, does Prince seem like a guy who can get to the practice squad without being plucked? And if so, isn't that a solution unless we determine for sure that Clyde's going to be not able to be ready to go?
Yeah,
just as one number, I'm saying.
I absolutely think so. He was on the practice squad last year. So, I mean, I would think he had a really good run the second game against the Lions. But to your point, Blair, or Vi, sorry, I made you better looking than you were. To your point, Vi, yeah, I mean, he had a big run against the Lions, but he's been a guy that if you got him to your practice squad last year, I just don't think he's shown enough to the rest of the NFL to say, we have to have this guy and we're going to cut a current player on our own 53-man roster to bring this guy in. And, you know, if you're Deneric Prince too, I mean, all things being equal, I know he doesn't get to choose who takes him on waivers, but you would happily take a spot back on the Chiefs practice squad. And he got elevated at points last year, and he definitely could be elevated at points this year as well. The big question mark is what you said, Vahe, whether Clyde remains on the Chiefs 53-man roster, they feel comfortable with him going, and he's not on some sort of injured reserved non-football injury list to start the season to kind of ramp back up. But that with his PTSD is sort of unknown at this point. I think Deneric is definitely right on the roster bubble. He's one of those guys that is right there. Could go either way, but again, a lot will depend on what happens with Clyde here and how the Chiefs feel about him.
And Lewis Reed-Zammit is not on the roster bubble. Am I correct on that? I think hoping to get him on the practice squad and continue to develop him. Even though we've seen a lot of him on the field, right? As a running back, as a return specialist, and even got a couple of kickoffs during the Lions game. So intriguing player to be sure. Not ready for the NFL at this moment.
I'm trying to remember, and you guys probably remember better than I do. Is there not a very specific international spot that allows him to, be under that umbrella and sort of helps them massage the math a little bit more with other aspects of it?
So I actually asked specifically about this with the Chiefs, and Chu Godric has that spot for the Chiefs, and he still is in that designation. Lewis Reed-Zammit will have to clear waivers to remain on the Chiefs practice squad, so they risk losing him. The problem for him is just that, again, when we're talking about putting behavior on tape and seeing things over time, the growth process has just not been as quick as the Chiefs hoped. You know what I mean? And that's tough. It's tough to go from rugby to football. Now, the thing about Lewis is, he has a lot of things going for him if you are the Carolina Panthers or one of these teams that's New England Patriots. I mean, he's got international fanfare. He's a really good-looking guy. I noticed we have lots of photos in our system of Lewis Reed-Zammit. I don't think it's a coincidence that he's very photogenic and has a nice smile, and people like to look at him. And then, again, he could develop over time. He's a really good athlete. So you do risk losing him, but I think this is why it made more sense if you just look big picture. Lewis Reed-Zammit is a guy, if your team was 2-14 last year or 2-15, okay, you take him, you develop him, you keep him on your roster, you don't risk losing him. With the Chiefs, this was always a scenario because they're trying to win their third straight Super Bowl. They can't sit around and wait for a guy to develop and hope that he becomes something that helps them win 8 games next year and 10 games the next year. They got to win right now. So they're going to risk losing him to waivers. But at this point, I just don't think there's any other option out there. And again, NFL teams have their own roster decisions, roster problems. It'll be fascinating to see if he gets through. I think he will get through and get to the Chiefs practice squad. But like I said, there's a reason for other teams to take a good, hard, long look at him just because of not only what he is as an athlete, but what he is as potentially kind of a mini superstar and what he could potentially do for a team marketing-wise as well.
Jesse, you neglected to mention the other part of his allure, the accent.
Oh, my gosh.
It's you guys just made me, as you were talking about it, it made me think about that Seinfeld character, the Wiz, that has the twinkle in his eye and everybody's drawn to. Let's hope there's more substance behind Lewis. I think there is.
And how odd is it, Jesse, to hear you refer to the Patriots as sort of a bottom feeder? I'm old enough to remember when they were winning Super Bowls.
Call him as I see him, Blair. No, it is totally enchanting when Lewis Reed-Zammit is talking about his Chiefs teammates and calling them the boys or his mates. So it is great to listen to. And listen, I mean, if I'm being honest with you guys, like when he first signed with the Chiefs, I thought this is going to be kind of an interesting sideshow that might not be very football related, but he has been great and humble and likable every step of the way. So I hope he makes it to the Chiefs practice squad, because I think he could have a future in Kansas City. I think they could develop him into something, and he seems very eager to learn the sport. It's going to take some time. We heard Matt Nagy say this very same thing earlier this week. He said, I would preach patience with Louis Rees-Zammit. It's just not going to happen this year. It doesn't look like, again, unless he comes out in this final preseason game and does something that is so crazy that the Chiefs are forced to make a decision they probably don't want to.
A very good ambassador, not only for the Chiefs and football, but for his country and rugby.
Yeah.
You're right. He's been terrific and with the media. So good on him, and best of luck to him, no matter what the decision. By the way, the decision-making process after the Thursday game, the other preseason games get played Friday and Saturday. That's the end of the NFL preseason, and then decisions begin to get made. And I think some of the veteran players will know pretty soon afterwards. Teams will give them a heads up of whether they're going to keep or not, give them an opportunity to land elsewhere. But it's Tuesday. Next Tuesday is the day. I think it's at 3 o'clock. Is it 3 p.m. Central, Jesse, or 2 p.m. Central? That's when the 53-man roster has to be turned into the NFL.
Yeah, and they've changed some rules with it too, which makes it interesting, which is you can place players on IR immediately and switch those guys off. Usually in the past, there's kind of some weird loopholes I had talked about on a previous podcast here where like Elijah Lee would get cut in quotations, and then they would just say, don't pick up your phone for 24 hours. We're going to re-sign you because we have to put a guy on IR. This year, you don't have to do that. So there's a little bit of that roster math that's going to be a little more clear for teams out there. So that'll be good. But yeah, that's always as you guys talked to McCole Hardman about earlier this week, that's always one of those days where everybody's holding their breath and certain guys knowing their positions, knowing they're kind of on that bubble. It's unsettling. It's an unsettling day for a lot of people.
Listen, we've talked about the quality of the Chiefs roster, and obviously for the team that's had all the success that it's had over the last few years. However, they do, come up, I think, a little short in a couple of positions, and the possibility of Brett Veach and the Chiefs making a trade, or claiming a player, or making a trade, or acquiring more talent to shore up a couple of positions on the back end, not out of the realm of possibility. I look at defensive end right now with Charles Omenihu out. I can't remember what the latest on him is, but he's not going to start the season with the Chiefs while recovering from the ACL suffered in the AFC Championship game. There's a thinness, right, at defensive end, at the rush end position after you get through George Karlaftis and Mike Dana. We've got Felix Anudike-Uzomah, Malik Herring, and you tell me, Jesse, who's after that, and is that enough for the Chiefs to go forward, or they need to go out and find somebody?
They've got rotation there with guys that can play inside and outside, so they sort of try to mask that a little bit. But
Chris Jones, of course, is chief among them.
Yeah, exactly. Mike Dana, obviously inside, outside, that sort of versatility. But no, I'm with you, Blair. That seems like one where the Chiefs will be perusing if other teams cut a defensive end to potentially bring one in. Truman Jones has been a guy with them for a while, but I don't anticipate that, he is potentially the solution to what you're talking about, which is if one guy rolls his ankle, another guy gets hurt, then all of a sudden you're very thin on that particular position. So, that seems like the one position to me that the Chiefs could definitely be snooping around, looking for a trade, looking for a waiver wire claim. And maybe there's a guy on the roster that makes it initially that might not be there after that. But, this is sort of what the Chiefs asked for, though. It's interesting. I keep mentioning this, but they brought in no defensive players from outside the building as free agents this year. So I think part of their plan here is they believe they can coach these guys up in Spag's really complicated scheme to say, hey, with another year and everybody knows what they're doing and everybody's cohesive, move forward and do what you can do and be creative and have exotic blitzes and sort of go with the thing that you know rather than the thing you don't know. And so I think that's where the Chiefs are right now. It might not be ideal to be a body short there, and they got to hope that a guy like Felix continues to develop and show a little bit more every single week. We saw a little bit more in the preseason this year with his get off and some of his hand movement. That's been better than a year ago. Maybe he can continue to progress, still a really young player. But the Chiefs are sort of rolling with what they got. I mean, you want to talk about, running it back. They've run it back defensively, and that's kind of been the grand plan here for the Chiefs in this particular season on defense. And so they have to hope that works. And whether they bring in another body or not, that's sort of been how they've approached this thing. And that's sort of the the thing they're going with. And if it works, then a lot of people will be happy. But if they remain a body short, then I'm sure we'll look back at the offseason and go, should they have signed one more guy there to give themselves a little bit more security?
One other place where I wonder if they're a body and maybe a role short is in the backfield still. I mean, if Pacheco gets hurt and we don't know what's going on with Clyde, I mean, we all love Carson Steele, Crocky J, but I mean that's a lot to put on the shoulders of guy, rookie, and I don't know that also that they have yet answered anything that tells us they've got the Jerick McKinnon replacement, while Jerick McKinnon is still out there. So I just wonder about that. I mean, I wonder if they'd be motivated to shore that up a little bit with either somebody who's demonstrated more ability to play that role or somebody that's just more veteran depth.
There'll be a veteran player on the waiver wire, a veteran running back. There's no doubt about it. And we'll see if the Chiefs are tempted to go in that direction. Hey, so the Chiefs draft class is interesting to me in that there could be a couple of cuts from the draft class, which would be unusual for the Chiefs. It's happened once, twice, but they're in the Brett Veach era, but I don't recall the possibility of two drafted players not making the 53. And there's a possibility there, isn't there, Jesse, with Kamal Hadden and CJ Hansen as the leading candidates for that.
Yeah, I think when we talk about this too, we have to first acknowledge that, this is sort of the exception rather than the rule. Like the Chiefs are usually very committed to their draft picks and keep them. And that's not how all NFL teams work. A lot of teams cut their 6th and 7th round picks. It doesn't always work out for you. But this year, it seems like those two guys are very much in danger. Kamal Hadden was kind of a gamble on talent. He had the sort of size that the Chiefs like at cornerback. Seemed to have maybe some red flags when it came to, character type stuff coming in. But we just haven't seen him with the second or third string. We've seen him way down the depth chart, and they really haven't given him an opportunity to play. And the depth chart, when you're talking about practices, is kind of the ultimate telltale guide, like how they feel about guys. So guys like Keith Taylor have been ahead of him. Guys like Kelvin Joseph have been ahead of him. So yeah, probably needs something crazy to happen for the Chiefs to keep him. And then, CJ Hansen is the same thing. Like they took Hunter Norzad in the 5th round and liked CJ Hansen in the 7th, but I mean, probably wanted one of those guys to pan out, probably hoped that, out of those two guys, one would be good. And we just haven't seen CJ Hansen with the type of reps up top that you would expect. And they also have some depth at offensive line. I mean, unless they're going to cut a guy like Lucas Niang, who's been with the system for a long time, you got to cover all those bodies and pieces. So you're talking Wanye, you're talking Lucas Niang, you're talking Hunter Norzad, and then they kept Mike Caliendo last year. He seems like the immediate backup to a lot of those positions on the interior. And I guess if you keep 10, maybe you can squint and find a spot for him. But I would definitely say, at least from what we've seen so far, he could be a guy that's a casualty as well. But we've seen this before, like Najee Johnson, his first year, he got hurt, but was able to kind of stay with the roster and everything. Or actually, I think he was the practice squad his first year, and the second year is when he emerged. But he got back to the practice squad. So still hope for these guys. Darian Kennard's another guy who they released and then got back to the practice squad. So I'm sure there's a chance that these guys don't get claimed by their teams, that they'll remain with the Chiefs. It's just has not maybe gone as quickly as they had hoped with these two particular guys.
A little more roster math. If they keep 10 offensive linemen, they're not keeping 4 running backs or 4 tight ends or 7 wide receivers. It's going to have to come from one of those positions if they balance the offense and defensive numbers. So let's a little final thought here on the injuries. Steve Spagnuolo said it earlier this week at the press conference. He hasn't had a practice with his starting 11, even went to 12 and 13 throughout the training camp. And you start with Justin Reed, the safety. He hasn't been available throughout camp. And, Chris Jones and Derek Nottie and all the cornerback, all the starting cornerback candidates have missed time. Joshua Williams is the latest. I think we're going to see Jalen Watson get some snaps in the game on Thursday just to get him on the field and get him acclimated to some game speed. It's been a tough preseason training camp for the Chiefs in that regard, Jesse, hasn't it? That they've missed a lot of snaps among starters in this camp.
Yeah, and I mean, I can throw it to Vahe too. It's interesting hearing Steve Spagnuolo talk yesterday, before the preseason game. Basically, every question was like, is it disappointing that you haven't seen all your players on the field? Is it frustrating that this guy hasn't been out there? Is it sad that this guy hasn't been out there? And so that really has been the theme. But like I said before, I think the hope for them is, for one, they believe all these guys are going to be back. Nick Bolton, Chris Jones, Justin Reed, even if they haven't had practice time, they're going to be back and ready for the first game. And the second part of this is you are not losing guys that haven't been in the system and haven't played here. So the hope is kind of what I talked about before, which is the cohesion that carried you before can carry you now, because Justin Reed knows what he's doing, and Nick Bolton knows what he's doing, and Chris Jones knows what he's doing. Those guys should be able to hit the ground running once they get back out there.
I really agree with that. And I think that last point is, to me, the most comforting point for Chiefs fans, which is that these guys have been here, and they've by and large grown as Spags has ramped up the defense and the looks over the last couple of years. They've been immersed in that. So I think that part of it you can be, you can feel pretty okay about. There is something about, the mesh of playing together at these speeds and with the same units that's, you'd rather have than not. But I don't think it'll impair them much. But maybe it's going to be one of those years where we see the more typical Spags defense that gets way better late in the season instead of starts off pretty good.
Well, if it approaches last year's defense, they'll be in pretty good shape, right? Number 2 in yards, fewest yards allowed and fewest points scored. It was an amazing defense for Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs. So, okay, Chiefs are out to avoid an 0-3 preseason. I'll have to look that up. The last time a team went winless in the preseason and went on to win the Super Bowl, I think the Chiefs had a losing record in 2019. It was back when they played 4. I think they were 1-3 in the preseason, and then haven't had a losing preseason since then. But they're guaranteed of that losing preseason for the Chiefs this year. And listen, obviously not important at all. But Andy Reid has been a little. He's called out his team a little bit. Wants to see more toughness, and hadn't he, Vahe? You haven't a little bit. Maybe a little disenchanted by some of the efforts of the preseason for Andy?
Yeah, I think I can't remember if this is verbatim, but the basic notion that he said the other day was that wasn't very good blocking and tackling by I think second and third units is more or less who he called out. And I think that knowing Andy as we do, that he values blocking and tackling.
He might. He just might. Yeah.
So Vahe, I want to call out the real person who failed at this, and it's a fellow Penn man. It is Justin Watson early in the game on the wide receiver screen.
Oh, that was a bad miss. First, might have been the first play of the game or second play of the game.
Yeah, it might have set the tone. And again, he's a vet; he'll get it right. All those sorts of things. But it was interesting. I even kind of saw a video clip. Hollywood Brown, the Chiefs receiver, had kind of mentioned this while he was on his Twitch stream playing video games, and said that they needed to create like $1,000 bounty. If you miss a block and get your other receiver lit up, you pay him $1,000 because you should not catch the ball and get hit. And so I actually think that Andy Reid's comments were a pretty direct reference to Justin Watson. Like I said, veteran guy, you figure he's going to get it right, but that did kind of set a jarring tone to the start of the game. And that's the sort of blocking and tackling thing that Andy Reid's referencing.
And I do believe that as they teach in the Ivy League, receivers are generally good blockers. I think Justin's got a track record that says he's not bad at that part of the game.
Well, for Jesse Newell and the best Ivy League wide receiver on this in this conversation, Vahe Gregorian. Great conversation, guys. We'll do it again soon. That'll do it for this episode. Thanks to producer Randy Mason for putting together the show, and to our SportsBeat KC staff of Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian and Jesse Newell for sharing their expertise. Hey, thanks for listening. Let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a rating and review. We'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in and around Kansas City.